Hey, who's got two thumbs and is going to see the Rise of Skywalker on Saturday at 11 a.m. for the 10th time? This guy. Welcome to the show. It is Positively Star Wars here on My Nerd World, and I am your host, Jon Justice, and I'm so glad you're with the show again this week. We have a lot to get to. Obi Wan Kenobi, potential of Knights of the Old Republic movie in the works. Also, Taika Waititi, why I really want a Taika Waititi Star Wars movie. Your listener feedback, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Rise of Skywalker. I had the really great opportunity to go on the Zing This podcast. Check it out. This was one of the, this was the first time that I was able to be interviewed based solely on, for the most part, we did talk some Star Wars in the podcast, but about my science fiction series EMBARK. Which is available on Amazon.com. Zanger, who is also on the Knights of Vader podcast with my buddy Zach, really enjoyed that podcast. Their show this week, talking about the Madman Chris Terrio treatment, is really good. So if you were missing a sort of lengthy commentary on Positively Star Wars about Chris Terrio's script, go and check out the Knights of Vader, because Zach and his guest host this week really did a fantastic job breaking down all of what Colin Trevorrow had planned for episode 9. Also, some concept art got leaked for Duel of the Fates, which is what it was called, and I talked about it a bit on last week's show. And we'll get into a little bit more of it in listener feedback this week, because I got a couple of emails from you that wanted to comment on what Chris Terrio wanted to do. But I had this great opportunity to go on Zang this week to talk about my books, and it was really an enjoyable time. It's fun for me to be on the other side and being asked questions, especially when it pertains to the stories that I'm writing that were inspired by Star Wars and the movies of my youth. And so that was, I would encourage you to go and check it out. It came out on Thursday. Zang This. You can find it wherever you go and find podcasts, iTunes, Podbean. Go and check it out, especially if you've read the EMBARK books. But on the show, Zanger had asked me about the name change, which I've talked about, from just a Star Wars podcast or a Star Wars show to Positively Star Wars, and the focus on the show being positive. My intention was never to go and change sort of the content of how I do the show. It was more just about being way more upfront about it and what you can expect watching the show or listening to the show. I had some individuals on Twitter, and you can follow me at Jon Justice, Jon, or at the My Nerd World, both of those accounts. I use both. The Jon Justice one I use more so for the full-time radio job, and then My Nerd World's obviously for the podcast and the EMBARK stories that I'm writing. But somebody had tweeted at me and was disappointed that I hadn't covered the Chris Terrio and I'm sorry, the Colin Trevorrow. My bad. If I said that earlier wrong too, I apologize. But the Colin Trevorrow, they were upset that I hadn't talked about it more on the show, and they made a comment that I had positivity blinders on. And I wanted to talk just briefly about that, and then we'll get into all the news this week. Because I'll be honest with you, that bothered me a little bit, because I don't feel like I have positivity blinders on. And I went back and forth in a pretty healthy exchange, with sort of, relatively speaking, when it comes to Twitter, right? But we had a pretty healthy exchange, and I explained my position a little bit more. It's not that I don't pay attention to the negativity that's out there. I do. It's not that I didn't go and read the script that Colin Trevorrow did for episode 9. I did. And again, I'll talk more about that in the listener feedback portion of the show. I'll be critical on the show, and I'll sometimes discuss negative things, but I don't want that to be the focus by any stretch of the imagination. And this is what I wanted to zero in on. And actually, my buddy Zach over on Knights of Vader, this is what kind of inspired me to talk about this. He was talking about being objective about Star Wars, right? And sort of the difference between being, because he's very critically objective. He tries to look at it from a very sort of realistic and rational point of view, and he may describe it differently, but I know exactly, I don't consider Zach to be a negative guy or his commentary to be negative. I consider him to be very opinionated, and he stresses that it's his opinion, but he's also very objective in looking at Star Wars, and I totally respect that. from my point of view, objectivity as it relates to Star Wars doesn't mean it's not entertaining. Okay. So I can be objective about all the films, right? Easily. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this today. I specifically choose, for the most part, not to be. Because you can go and shred these movies if you wanted to. But that's not really fun for me. I do see value in that in certain circumstances, right? But at the same time, I just have a lot more fun just celebrating Star Wars and talking about the things that I love about the franchise and the content that we're so blessed to be able to read and to listen to and to watch. But I totally get the objectivity. And so, case in point, I can admit that there are leaps of logic that don't make a whole lot of sense in all the films, right? People don't want to go and criticize The Last Jedi and the slow speed space chase. I get it. There's not a lot of sense going on there. Explain to me how when the Supremacy fires their laser cannons at the retreating Resistance fleet, okay, right, who are faster so they can stay out of range. Okay, first off, when they fire those laser blasts, why are they arcing? They arc. They go pew. It's space. There's no air. There's no reason for them to arc. If they can't catch them, then can't they just do a quick, maybe, light speed skipping or skimming or whatever, and just hop ahead and then come the other direction, right? Okay. Here's the deal. If we did what so many people do now, right? And again, this is a sort of a very fine line that I realize I'm walking here, but there seems to be a lot of overanalyzation of the sequel trilogy. Okay. If we leveled this type of scrutiny to the original trilogy, let's just say, for example, Return of the Jedi. If we put that kind of scrutiny that we have now within social circles on a movie like Return of the Jedi, we could shred, anybody could shred the ridiculousness of so many of the plot points in Return of the Jedi. It would make it look exponentially worse than what we're currently hearing say about The Rise of Skywalker. Now, I know there's more going on there. Of course, there's so much of the frustration, which I probably won't get into on the show today. At some point, maybe I'll address it. But so much of the frustration around people who wanted to see Ben Solo live, and I get that. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I think in a lot of circumstances, it's gone way over the top. It really, really has. But again, there is a sort of a nostalgia shield on the original trilogy where, because we revere that original trilogy so much, we don't allow ourselves to go overboard in overanalyzing those films. Because if we did, you could tear them apart just the way people have the prequels, and more specifically to the sequel trilogy. Okay. So again, all of that is to say, I get being objective, and I will be on the show. But ultimately, I look past all that. I just want to have fun, and I love these movies. It's Star Wars. And there's no sound in space, for example, right? I mean, there's so many just sort of leaps in logic that you have to be able to take. I am more than willing, as a fan of this beloved franchise, to go and overlook those things. Let me give you one example from The Rise of Skywalker, and then we'll move on to the news this week. Why in the Sam heck, let's just say, this is me, I love this scene. It's one of my favorite parts of The Rise of Skywalker. Okay, so let me preface that comment. This is one of my favorite parts of the movie. But if I'm being objective, it is ridiculous, and I have no idea how in the world the circumstances would have played out to make this happen. Why did Rey have to flip over Kylo Ren's TIE Whisper? Okay. Was Kylo trying to kill her in that moment, or was it what he said afterwards, after they force pulled the First Order shuttle that Rey thought Chewbacca was on, right? And he makes a comment later on, I pushed you on Pisana because I wanted you to see what you were capable of. So I assume that's the moment when he decides he's going to counter Rey trying to pull that First Order troop transport out of the sky. which begs the question, then why in the Sam heck, Kylo Ren, did you almost run her over with your TIE Whisper? And where did Rey decide to make the decision that the logical thing to do was to run and then do a backflip and take off one of its wings with her lightsaber? Not to mention the fact that, I don't know about you, that explosion that took place after that cockpit went a-rolling was pretty big, but he walked out of it. Okay, so if you just tuned in, I don't care about any of that. But it's a really good example of objectivity, right, versus just going with it. I like to just go with it because I adore every single little moment of that scene. I adore that whole movie, but from Rey handing her weapons and stuff and her staff over to Finn to go walking out there, to when Kylo Ren shows up with the TIE Whisper and it comes flying into frame through that little valley before it comes barreling down and you get the shot of him in the helmet and then she flips over. It's amazing. It's awesome. So is the scene with them pulling the shuttle out of the sky, the troop transport, and then her force lightning it, right? All of that's great. But if you look at it way too objectively or overanalyze it, it makes no sense whatsoever, and I don't care. That's my point. Try to make sense, if you will, of the whole opening sequence of Return of the Jedi. That whole situation of them trying to get Han back and Luke going there and the droids and Leia and all, it makes no sense whatsoever. If you really try to go and reverse engineer it. But it's Star Wars, so we don't care. That's what I'm trying to say about the show. So I spent 14 minutes on that. That was way longer than I wanted to, but I just felt it was necessary because maybe for some of you out there that struggle with this stuff, and there's some really good listener feedback this week that kind of plays on this as well. Maybe for some of you guys that struggle with this stuff, perhaps this helps to sort of work through that because it is difficult right now. If you pay attention to social networking and Twitter, man, it's a cesspool of negativity out there. And I'm just over it. You do Star Wars however you want to do Star Wars, right? And I'll do Star Wars how I want to do Star Wars. There seems to be a definite lack of understanding and agreeing to disagree out there on social networking. And thank the good Lord on high almighty that Twitter has a mute function. I mute, I don't block, right? It's better that way. All right, let's get to some of the news this week. One of the big items, speaking of negativity, it seems like anytime a rumor drops, these clickbait sites pop up like a bunch of weeds in the yard in the middle of spring, right? Trying to take advantage of it so they can get their clicks and make their Google AdSense money. But some rumors started floating around that the Obi Wan Kenobi live-action TV show on Disney Plus had been scratched, and a lot of different places were reporting this. So I'm going to cut right to the chase on this. Here's the deal, straight from Ewan McGregor itself, because shortly after those reports came out that the Obi Wan Kenobi TV series was that'll be directed by Deborah Chow was put on indefinite hold. Ewan McGregor's agent actually came out and said, "No, we're moving forward just like we were before. Everything's fine." Well, a legitimate report came out either yesterday or today from Collider, and the deal sounds like, and Ewan McGregor has responded to this, what it sounds like is happening here is that there's going to be some rewrites being done on the scripts for the live-action TV show. The live-action TV show was being stretched into 6 episodes, probably about an hour long each, based off of the movie treatment, because it was originally supposed to be a movie. Then when Solo didn't perform at the box office the way that they had hoped, Disney ended up going, whoop, pump the brakes, we got to figure all this out. It sounds like they're reworking the scripts because they want the best possible show to put on Disney Plus. And that may involve trimming down the series from 6 episodes to maybe 4 episodes. There's some rumors going around now that they may actually just turn it into a movie for Disney Plus, which I think is also a pretty good idea and a possibility. Ewan McGregor was being interviewed at a recent press screening for something. It might have been Harley Quinn. I'm not 100% sure. But basically, he acknowledged the fan freak out online and then said, hey, look, we're doing some rewrites on the script. The scripts are great. This is what he said. The scripts are great. We're doing some rewrites on them because we want the best product possible. We were supposed to begin filming in the summer. It looks like we may not start filming until later in the year. The Obi Wan Kenobi series wasn't slated to be on Disney Plus until next year anyhow. So according to Ewan McGregor, who plays Obi Wan Kenobi, the series is moving forward, is still on schedule to be released at the time that Disney and Lucasfilm intend, because we don't have a firm date on that. They're just doing some rewrites. I hate the fact that we're privy to all this information. I really don't like it. It's not changing anytime soon, so it's kind of like my attitude towards the Colin Trevorrow Episode 9 script. It's like, that movie ain't getting made. It's an interesting curiosity, but we're never going to see that get made. So, you know, I mean, we could spend time on it, but there's a part of me that goes, I'd rather talk about the content that's either being made or that's already out there. So the same thing kind of rings true with what's going on here. This isn't information that fans need to know. If the show is still on schedule the way that it was supposed to be, it's a bummer that we live in this FOMO world, this fear of missing out, and this rampant desire for clicks, and I get it. Look, I started the video version of the show. For those that don't know, if you're listening on the podcast, if you hadn't heard yet, if you go to YouTube, you can see a video version of what you're watching here, which is mostly me talking with various images. I'll sometimes throw in some videos, but it's exactly the same content. You just have a visual element of seeing my big old white pasty face. But I did that because I wanted to kind of diversify my ability to to pull in the ad revenue from this. You know, I get on my podcast, I get not a lot, but I get some. I would love it to grow and be able to do this more often, but, I need more viewers to do that. I'm not going to go down the road of just doing content for the sake of getting clicks, but I definitely did decide to do a video version of the show to sort of maximize the content that I'm creating. And so I understand websites that are out there to go and do the same thing, but so many of them, man, their scruples, whatever, they just don't care. They'll run anything just to get the clicks, and people will click on it. Look at look at Mike Zero, for crying out loud. I mean, the guy makes a living off of lying. It's disgusting, but he's got to live with that. He has to look in the mirror and deal with that, and if the money that he brings in from the Google ad dollars, from YouTube, whatever, if that's enough for him to satisfy the fact that he's a big old liar, then whatever. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do what I always do on the show. But because of that, because of this desire for these different outlets to get these clicks, they're more than willing, especially when it comes to negativity, to run with this stuff. And it sucks. It just does. It sucks because it hurts this part of the fandom. And again, this is the minority part of the fandom. Don't ever forget that, right? Just because you had 15 people comment on a particular the Rise of Skywalker thread on Twitter because you wrote a letter to Lucasfilm doesn't mean that that's representative of the majority by any stretch of the imagination. Good for you, right? And good for you to get some responses, but that is a tiny, tiny fraction. We've broke down those demographic numbers and those percentage numbers before. The majority of the Star Wars fans that make Disney and Lucasfilm the most amount of money are not you and me. No, they're the average audience that goes out to go and see these movies. And these live-action movies are made for that audience, which is why we're getting content like The Mandalorian that's a little bit more on par with people like us, because they have the opportunity to go and do that. So, Obi Wan Kenobi, still on track, just doing some rewrites on the script, regardless of what you might say. If things change, I'll certainly cover it on the show. Another report from Cinelinx came out. And we've been hearing about this for a while. So we know that there's the High Republic, or whatever the Sam heck they're calling it, Project Luminous and the video game, and the potential that the next series of movies will be set some 400 years prior to the Phantom Menace. But there hasn't been confirmation on that. Empire Magazine did say that in January we will be told at some point who the next director will be for the next live-action Star Wars theatrical release in 2022. Counting down the days, we got about a week, so hopefully by next week's episode, we'll have that information. But a new piece of a new rumor broke on Cinelinx that said that in development was a Knights of the Old Republic movie, and that it would not be a direct sort of one-to-one comparison with the video games, but more along the lines of what Disney has been doing of potentially a sequel based in that era with those characters, but they would kind of grab bits and pieces from those stories and then create new canon based off those stories. I would want to see it. Don't misunderstand. I think it would be rad. I also think it's kind of a mistake for Disney and Lucasfilm right now because, as I've mentioned on the show, anything that you're doing that already has content out there, even if it is a part of Legends or the expanded universe and isn't canon, there's so many attached preconceived notions about that. And that's tough, right? I mean, that's really, really tough. The artwork that was that came out, some concept art for Duel of the Fates, Colin Trevorrow's version of Episode 9, they didn't do a whole like it was like 20 different images of artwork, right? Concept art, really interesting stuff. It would have made an interesting Star Wars movie. I don't think it would have been a good Episode 9 by any stretch. I'm very happy with the Episode 9 and the Rise of Skywalker that we got. But with that artwork being released, the same phenomenon is happening of people going, oh, why didn't we get that? Wouldn't it be great if we got that artwork? And again, this just goes back to those preconceived ideas in people's heads of content being made that doesn't match what their headcanon is because they already have an idea of what it's supposed to be based off of existing elements that are already out there. So to go and do a Knights of the Old Republic is going to invite that type of scrutiny of, well, that's not like the video game. I don't know. They should have just gone straight up with the video game. Okay. It probably doesn't matter. And it's more about individuals like myself that get annoyed by that have to go and try to avoid it. Because like I said, it's not necessarily for you and I. It is, but it's also for the masses out there and what's going to be best for them. So, look, I'm happy to see any Star Wars. I think the era would be really interesting to explore, but it will have a level of baggage attached to it that will be completely unavoidable because of how revered and loved those Knights of the Old Republic games were. And they were great. Those stories are fantastic. I would definitely want to see it. And I love the design concepts from the video games. I think that aesthetic in a live action form with some changes would be amazing. But again, it's going to have that attached sort of preconceived idea of the content that's already out there. And so, I trust that Disney and Lucasfilm know what it is that they're doing. All right, so let's switch gears just briefly, and I just want to comment on a couple of things, and then we're going to dive right into your listener feedback this week. My son Logan had not had the opportunity to watch the last 3 or 4 episodes of The Mandalorian, and honestly, the last 2 episodes are probably the 2 that I'd seen the least. All the other ones I'd seen 4 or 5 times at least. So last weekend, we sat down and we watched those final 4 episodes. That last episode of The Mandalorian, directed by Taika Waititi, is amazing. And now that I've had the opportunity to watch it a few times, it is my favorite of all the Mandalorian episodes. And I absolutely understand now why Jon Favreau decided to have Taika direct that final episode. It's got humor. His camera angles and his pacing and directing when it comes to the action are fantastic, in my opinion. Thinking about Thor Ragnarok, which is one of my favorite Marvel films, got me thinking more about what a Taika Waititi Star Wars would look like, and I think it would be fantastic. I really want a Taika Waititi Star Wars movie now. I think that his ability to weave in some drama, his action sense, his storytelling ability, and his humor would be exactly what the franchise needs right now. So I hope those rumors are true that came out, that he's being tapped to potentially direct a Star Wars movie. I really, really do, because at first I was like, yeah, I'd like to see it. And the more I thought about it and going back and watching not just Thor Ragnarok, but definitely that final episode of The Mandalorian really, really got me excited. And I watched a few interviews with him. I like a lot of his other work of what he's done. What We Do in the Shadows is fantastic. It's so funny. I haven't had an opportunity to see Jojo Rabbit yet, but some friends of mine that have say it's great. So that has me really excited of the potential of Taika Waititi doing a Star Wars movie. But I'll repeat what I said last week. I don't know if that needs to be I don't know if that should be one of the big sort of tentpole movies from the standpoint of this is going to be the thing that starts the next series of movies. Maybe he is the right guy. I don't know. I'd have to see what time, what era they were going to be looking at. But like I said, I think the future of Star Wars is really, really bright, and the idea of a Taika Waititi movie really, really has me excited. All right, one more quick thing, and then we'll move over to your listener feedback this week. I just wanted to say a quick thank you. I doubt any of them will watch it, right? But just for me personally, I wanted to say a quick thank you to Kathleen Kennedy, to J.J. Abrams, and Lawrence Kasdan, who obviously wrote The Force Awakens. Ron Howard, okay, to a certain extent. Jon Kasdan, Lawrence Kasdan's son. But we're talking about the saga films. Gareth Edwards, obviously, okay, with Rogue One. But specifically, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, Lawrence Kasdan, Rian Johnson, Ron Bergman, his producer with Rian Johnson, and Chris Terrio. I love the sequel trilogy. I really, really do. It's fantastic Star Wars. In a different time, without the ability that we all have to have a megaphone and to let our voices be heard whenever we want, which is great in a lot of ways, but in a different time, I think these movies would be reflected on and would be analyzed much differently. If we were back when I was a kid and the original trilogy came out, and to a lesser extent when the prequel trilogy came out, and we were just having these conversations amongst ourselves about these movies, I think we would be a lot more objective. We would cut the movies a lot more slack. You don't have the element of dollars, right, in mind of, going back to the rant I did earlier. But I just wanted to thank all of those involved in the creation of the sequel trilogy, because it's really, really good. All three of these movies are so much fun. They're all very different. And I think for me, that's a good thing. The Force Awakens hits you right in all the nostalgic feels. It has the beats of those original trilogy movies with a pacing and an action sense and the effects of modern day cinema. The Last Jedi is a masterpiece, in my opinion. And between these two films, I think for me, it works really well. It's a very personal movie. It's a very different type of Star Wars movie. Obviously subverts expectations. We always talk about that. It's an artful movie. It's a beautiful movie. It's an emotional movie. And it set the stage for this amazing adventure that we got in The Rise of Skywalker. They're very different films, but they complement each other so well. It's like it really is like, sort of The Force Awakens was this amazing appetizer, right? Oh, that was perfect. They really, really set up my meal really well. All right, I'm ready for my main course. Rian Johnson serves up The Last Jedi. Oh my gosh, that Last Jedi steak was fantastic. That was so good. Oh, that was such a good meal. Oh, but I still got some room in my tummy. You mean I get dessert? It's The Rise of Skywalker. And The Rise of Skywalker, to me, really does take what was great about what Rian Johnson did, and Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams took that, expanded on it, and then plugged it into this amazing, fast-paced, visually stunning, John Williams scored to perfection film that's just the best dessert ever. It's totally not fattening. So I just wanted to personally say that because I love these movies. I'm like legit excited to go see The Rise of Skywalker again tomorrow in the theater for the 10th time. I really am. Oh, look, and I felt the same way about The Last Jedi, but the experience, it's a different experience. It really is. I love Zima. I probably haven't talked about it on the show, and a bunch of you probably went like, what in the world are you talking about? But it's one of these things that I'm kind of known for, oddly, in my full-time radio job. But I love Zima. And to me, and I also love Captain Morgan's Private Stock. Okay, so this is my example. And Captain Morgan's Private Stock is like the only hard alcohol that I don't need any sort of mixer with, so I can drink it straight. It's fantastic. So my Last Jedi is my Captain Morgan's Private Stock. The Rise of Skywalker, that's my 6-pack of Zima. That's just how that goes. So again, they're not listening. I just felt the need because so many people are out there being so negative about these films and demanding that, not demanding, but like asking Disney to put out other versions and other content. And I don't understand that. I get it, man. If that's you and that's what you want to do, that's great. That's fine. But, you know, what about the individuals out there that love this movie? I don't know. It's just whatever. So this is my little way to sort of pump some positivity out into the ether in the haze of all the negativity and the people that are ticked off because the ending of the movie didn't go the way that they wanted it to go. And that's fine. Man, that's your opinion. I'm not going to push back on it. You're allowed to feel and think whatever you want to think. But I just really wanted to say I love all three of these films. I'm so grateful. I feel so blessed that we have these movies. And thank you, again, to all those amazing content creators from the story group, right, to all the artists and all the amazing individuals that created this wonderful trilogy of films. It's just, thank you, guys. Thank you. I love Star Wars. I love The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, and I think they're all great films, and I'm so thankful that I can enjoy them for many, many years to come. All right, we have listener feedback. Some of this listener feedback is from last week, and some of it is from this week. Needless to say, thank you so much for writing in. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com or leave a comment on YouTube. By the way, if I end up repeating any of your listener feedback from last week, I apologize. That might happen, but I kind of danced around my notes here. So if I end up repeating one of them, I apologize if you heard this before. First one comes from Jen G. Thank you so much for writing in, Jen G, up front. And it fits right in with what I was just talking about. It seems we will never get away from the discourse concerning this trilogy. I saw your exchange of tweets with that person about the screening. I thought you were being extremely nice and not mansplaining anything. You mentioned perspective, and I think a lot of people went into this film wanting it to fix/fulfill what they wanted. You said you wanted more of a final battle, for example. However, you overall your overall love of Star Wars superseded that expectation. Yep. I do think there is a line with everyone where they could be turned off. However, going on and on in the negative does nothing because you are never able to move on. I didn't like Ben's death, but I did get Reylo. I said he died. It was sad he died. But I decided to focus on what I did love about the trilogy and go out of the negative vortex. I feel so much better and can see more clearly. I even decided to try and give Rogue One another try since it's my least favorite Star Wars movie. Fans get too deep into something they can't control, and then they get irate. Just be general audience, as you said. There was no way this was going to be a Jane Austen type of trilogy, although some couldn't help keep themselves from reading into parallels. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't take those expectations as fact into a movie. But it happened. But people complained about everything. Not enough Finn, not enough Rose, etc. And every right to not like those things, but don't stay bogged down in it because it won't change anything. I feel like I'm in therapy, writes Jen G. LOL. Now, I do think that actors should not use social media to complain about the films they were just in. I tend to agree. I didn't care for Mark Hamill's tweets, and I'm not caring about whatever is going on with John Boyega. Yes, they have a right to express their opinions, but they are doing a job. If I went around talking about my clients on Facebook, for example, I'd get sued, and it would leave me in a negative light. Yes, fans are hateful and nasty, but not as with everyone. Try to be better. But back to the positivity. Pre-ordered The Rise of Skywalker on Amazon. I've also pre-ordered the book. I really think Adam and Daisy were great in this trilogy, and I look forward to more Star Wars in the future and to more positive stuff about it. Thank you, John, for being a positive force. Thank you, Jen. I really do appreciate that, and I echo a lot of your sentiments. And don't misunderstand, right? Because I could totally get how, especially if we deviate on our opinions of what happened at the end of the movie, I can totally see how people would be frustrated or think that I am or somebody else is giving those individuals who aren't happy and are upset and expressing their emotions online a hard time. I'm not, man. You do Star Wars however you want to do Star Wars, right? I may not agree, but that's your choice to make, right? I get it, but I do think that a lot of what Jen is saying is true, and I guess what I really want to say is it's a bummer, because Star Wars should be joyful and should be something that we can all experience and have fun with together. And it's a bummer for me that some people didn't end up getting that, because I get so much joy out of it, right? That's really all that it comes down to. It's just a bummer for those people. I feel bad for them. I didn't make it, but I feel bad. I wish so many people could enjoy it the way that I do. I love the ending of that movie. Man, that ending moment between Rey and Ben, right when he saves her and she smiles at him and they kiss. It's so great. It's so great. It's one of my favorite moments in Star Wars, and that includes his passing. It's incredibly poignant and meaningful, and in my opinion, appropriate, right? What do you do with it afterwards? How do you explain it to, your kids that are watching, right? It's a fairy tale, and, people have to be held accountable for their actions. All right, I've done a lot of that already. Let's get some more of your listener feedback. Rome Ed writes this. I've read recently that The Rise of Skywalker was originally 45 minutes longer or so. Well, every movie is originally longer until its theatrical release, but I do think the studio should do what some fans beg for, which is the JJ cut, ? I personally think they should not, however. I personally think, no, they should not. However, I'm always hungry for more Star Wars. Yeah, I'm not buying this whole, I've talked about it last week, I'm not buying this whole JJ cut nonsense. I'm not buying it. Right? We'll get deleted scenes. If they want to put out an extended edition, that's fine. But those rumors came and went, and a lot of this stuff is fueled, again, by individuals who want to believe there's some other version of the movie out there that fits whatever idea they had in their head, and I just don't think that's the case. All right, let's go to a longtime listener, Howard Jr., and he writes this. I finally saw The Rise of Skywalker on New Year's Day. We waited because it was the only day my wife and kids and myself had off and could enjoy it together. And from hearing about the interruptions and the jeers from the audience members, I'm glad we did, because we were able to enjoy it in peace. And I apologize up front. This email is a little long. And I apologize up front because I did some editing. It was an emotional roller coaster, and even more for my wife. At the end, though, I felt a little empty. I'm not sure if that was because I had hoped that Ben had survived longer, or that I knew it was the end of this 42-year adventure I've lived and loved. Yes, there were things that I might have liked a little different, but all in all, I love this movie, and I'm glad I was along for the ride. Those that I know that hate it, I don't think that ever really enjoyed it that greatly in the first place. Just my opinion. Or were too wrapped up in the legend books and observation. People have been hating on Star Wars for a while, thinking of the documentary, The People versus George Lucas. I've never watched it. I don't have any desire to. Now, I did enjoy many Legends novels, especially Timothy Zahn's A Thrawn trilogy, and I was hoping for at least some mention of Mara Jade, but I'm okay with that. I can enjoy those Legend stories for what they are and love the sequel trilogy and the new ancillary Disney story they're telling as well. This is the way. I do have two things I wanted to touch on, though. First is Dark Rey's Swiss Army lightsaber. I had forgotten that her type of lightsaber is nothing new. My family and I just finished rewatching Rebels and are already again into Season 4 of the Clone Wars. In Season 2, Episode 18 of Rebels, the Temple Guardian, who was fighting Kanan, had a folded double-bladed saber. Yep. And in Clone Wars, Season 4, Episode 8, Jedi General Krell had two of these folding double-bladed sabers. And with Rey being a staff wielder to begin with, this fits perfect. The second, this is that I believe the Skywalkers as a whole were the chosen ones to balance out the Force. Anyways, I always enjoy your show. Thank you, Howard, and thank you for the positivity. Absolutely. Please keep it up as the hype dies down. Trust me, I will. Looking forward to another Modecast. That's coming this week. Longtime Doyle listener and friend of mine, Howard Jr. Thank you very much, Howard. I really appreciate the email. All right, let's go to Dale Erdman, who writes this. Misconduct 1 said that her son pointed out to her Padme gave her life force to Anakin to keep him alive because she saw the light in him just like her son Luke did. I always thought it was Sidious who stole her life force and kept Anakin alive. I've never heard anything definitive on that. I've always liked the idea that Sidious pulled Padme's life force out of her to keep Anakin Vader alive, but that's never been put out in canon as far as I know. Considering that, is it possible that Leia was holding onto her life force to give it to Ben when he dies because she knew he would give his life force to Rey? I think they didn't show certain scenes again after he disappeared, hiding the fact that Ben came back. I think they didn't show certain scenes again after he disappeared, hiding the fact that Ben came back. For a reason too revealing for the next saga, the Solo saga could likely begin in the near future. Hashtag Ben Solo lives if you really think about it. Ben and Rey are pronounced as one before the reigning official, before the, I don't understand this part here, talking about the land of Exegol. If you consider that, it could be viewed as Ben and Rey are married. When Ben give his life force to Rey to bring Rey to bring her back. They also become one in the sense that if Leia gave her life force to Ben, effectively Rey is married to a Skywalker. Okay, I see what you're saying there, Dale. Yeah, look, I know a lot of people are doing a bit of mental gymnastics to try to rectify in their own minds what happened to Ben Solo, and that's up to everybody else. I'm not. I agree with you that I think the idea was that Leia gave what was left of herself to reach out to Ben to try to get him to pull back from where he was going, and that when she did that, they were attached. So that in that moment, right, when she needed to, she ended up passing away as well. I'm still very much of the opinion, if we step back into the real world and look at this objectively, I'm still very much of the opinion that we're not going to see Adam Driver in any further Star Wars content. I think he's kind of like, it's possible, don't misunderstand. I mean, they got Harrison Ford to come back. I definitely think that Daisy Ridley would come back for more Star Wars, but I just get the feeling that not intentional because they knew he wasn't going to come back. I just think that, one, that was the best ending for Ben Solo, and it was the most appropriate, in my opinion. And it was beautifully handled, including the fact that he didn't show up at the end. My headcanon with the movie, my understanding of the movie, is that Leia gave herself and connected herself to her son so that she could help him in transforming into the Force, right? Which wouldn't necessarily lead to him being a Force ghost at the end. I think it was absolutely appropriate to just have Luke and Leia there at the end on Tatooine when Rey says, I'm Rey Skywalker. But I'm also very much of the opinion that Adam Driver's not going to be coming back anytime soon for, or coming back at all for any more Star Wars content. But that's just my opinion, okay? I could be wrong. I'd be fine if I was wrong. All right, next email. That comes from a friend of the show, a friend of mine, Ben Kent. Hey, John, your show's the best. Thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate that. To be honest, for a while, I didn't know how I felt about how positive you are on everything Star Wars. Now I feel like I need it, and I think Star Wars needs it. There's too much hate and false information being spread about Star Wars on the internet. I have no problem with people who disliked any of the sequels. I just want them to have their own legitimate reasons for doing so. I've had too many discussions with people who've basically said, I hate The Last Jedi because it's stupid. You're entitled to your opinion, and I don't think you're wrong if you don't like sequels. I really enjoyed them, writes Ben. Just stop eating up all the slam videos on YouTube that used bad arguments. At the very least, stop trying to make people feel bad for liking a movie. Amen. This is all to say Star Wars moving forward needs more positive online presence from the fan base. So thank you, John. Thank you very much, Ben. I do appreciate that. The Rise of Skywalker was great. Ben's redemption was perfect. I agree. All right. Moving on, and we go to a friend of the show, Dylan, who writes this. I wanted to give you my thoughts on The Rise of Skywalker. My favorite things. An epic conclusion to the trilogy and saga. appropriately grand in scale, and every second of the movie is so much fun. John Williams' work was incredible, especially during the arrival of the massive army of good guys. The music swelling into the main theme is one of my new favorite movie moments. Absolutely. I can't say enough good things about this soundtrack. I really can't. Superb acting, especially by Ian McDermott and Adam Driver. It was so fun to see McDermott as Palpatine again, and Driver is probably my favorite actor in Hollywood right now. He made Kylo/Ben my favorite character in the trilogy and perhaps the entire saga. I loved his arc, even how it concluded. The voices of Obi Wan, Anakin, Windu, Yoda, and company. Would have loved to see Anakin or Obi-Wan's Force Ghost, but I knew it was never really likely. There's a lot more I could say, but the email is long-winded as it is. There is a lot in this movie I could nitpick, but all the negativity and controversy these days has, in a way, exhausted my nitpickiness, and I'm just enjoying and loving the movie for what it is. Although I need a few more viewings under my belt, I'm inclined to rank it below The Last Jedi, and it's currently battling TFA for my second place spot in the trilogy. I was anxious to get you some of my thoughts. Can't wait for more repeat viewings for a reason. And for those that have read EMBARK, you'll know why Dylan wrote that. Right back at you, Dylan, for a reason. Dylan, thank you so much. As always, man, I appreciate it. All right, Edwin writes this. You wanted us to comment on the beginning of the movie as you go through it. What stuck out to me was Kylo pointing his saber at Palpatine. Reminded me of Anakin doing the same in Revenge of the Sith. The look on Palpatine's face says it all. I imagine him thinking to himself, I've had so many people threaten my life with a lightsaber. It's getting old, and my plan is working. Just a comment. Thanks, Edwin. Thank you, Edwin. I didn't really get into my plan of what I was going to do this week. I will eventually start doing that, but there ended up being the news that I wanted to talk about. The beginnings of movies, especially Star Wars movies, are really important to me. They really set the stage, and that whole combination of the opening crawl into the first shot of the film, the pan down from a starscape, always iconic. But to me, the start of a movie and for it to get going, especially a Star Wars film, was always something that I anticipate and I enjoy on every single watch. And maybe one day I'll actually break down sort of my favorite opening montages of a film. But I love them all. I really do. With The Rise of Skywalker, when I first saw it, and I've mentioned this before, I thought the pacing was just way too breakneck. I have no problem with it now, and I love it. The opening scene on Mustafar, I really thought was great. I know some people have a problem with it and the fact that they didn't talk about Vader's castle. They didn't talk about the fact that it was Mustafar. And I'm fine with that. I mean, that to me is something for the fans, for the average audience. And the guy that I work with, Drew, on the show, is a big Star Wars fan, but he's more of a casual fan. So I often will throw these types of criticisms at him to kind of get a gauge, and he doesn't care. He's like, I don't care that's Mustafar. I mean, it's cool you tell me now it's Mustafar. Oh, that was supposed to be a Vader's castle? Yeah, I didn't care either. But that whole opening segment with Kylo Ren on Mustafar and then him finding the Wayfinder, traveling into the unknown regions. I will say, again, being a little objective, I wish that we had maybe another 2 or 3 seconds of Kylo Ren navigating through wild space in that, I don't know what you call it, but that the red area, right, that he needed to pass through, that we end up going through a couple of times in the movie. I would have liked to have seen that a little bit more. Same thing when Rey is piloting Luke's X-Wing, which is one of my favorite moments of the film. I would have liked to have seen her travel through those unknown regions in that area where they have to map through all the red and the chaos in space. But again, that's a very minor, just objective complaint, very minor. Arrival on Exegol, everything with Palpatine, the rising of the Star Destroyers, and then we're right into that really nice, lighthearted moment on the Millennium Falcon with Chewie, Finn, and Poe playing the game, and then into that really exciting opening sequence, which I love every single aspect of that on that mining planet. And then when we finally get to Rey, that shot, that opening shot of Rey, floating in the air with the rocks swirling around her, trying to reach out to those voices of the Jedi past and not being able to do it. And then she does that, and that slow flip to the ground. It just so effectively establishes her power now as a training Jedi. Just spectacular. All right. 2 more here. Jax Monroe writes this. Great show, mate. Thank you, Jax. Cool name. Lastly, we'll end up on this one this week. Ben Fisher writes this. I listen to the podcast while I'm driving, and man, I need a way to get my thoughts down while I'm listening. I feel like I always have something interesting to respond to, but I forget about it later. Here are some of the bigger thoughts on my mind, besides Ben Solo dying, which I'm personally sick of talking about. I feel like there are other frustrations. I feel like the other frustrations have been that people may have with characters not getting on screen time, or that the plot areas are not explained well enough in the movie. Star Wars has always done this in their movies, and the books always provide more clarity. Right? This is a millennial thing where the movie needs to explain everything rather than taking the time to perhaps read a book. Star Wars might be one of the only major movie series that the movies are written first and the books are written second. Any other movies, Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, etc., the books were written first and then the movies came out. How often do you watch one of those movies and say to yourself, man, the book was better? I think any major Star Wars fans need to read the book for the movie and also the ancillary books, especially if you want clarity. How do you think the fact the books are written second affects the movies and the people talking about these movies? If the books were written first, do you think you would get less frustration from the fans, especially about the lack of explanations in the plot? All right, there's a little bit more here that I'll talk about, but let me address this question that Ben asked here. Look, I agree with you, but I don't think it's going to matter. I think you're right. These films are very much created like the original trilogy were, right? The sequel trilogy is. I think the prequel trilogy explains things pretty darn well. But these sequel trilogies are very much in the same vein of the original trilogy. In the original trilogy, we didn't get a lot of answers up front, like you were saying, right? Luke's dark side cave, as a kid, I had no idea what the hell was going on, right? Palpatine, we never got a background on him or where he was from, and he was 2 different people from The Empire Strikes Back to Return of the Jedi, for crying out loud. So I don't know. At this point in time, I don't think there's any way to navigate around the criticism anymore. It's just the world that we live in. The fact that everybody's got a bullhorn available at their fingertips via a computer and social networking. This is just the world that we're in. If you had a book written, let's say they went and did a Lost Stars. I love the book Lost Stars, by the way. It'd be fantastic as a movie. But let's say they went and made the movie. Well, you would get the book was better. Or you get they changed this from this, and why did they do that? And the book was my headcanon, and now they've done that. There is no winning anymore. We just all have to navigate this world that we live in right now, where everybody's got an opinion, and do a good job of exercising your hiding on YouTube and the mute function on Twitter. Ben goes on to say, as for the plot, I think too many people Star Wars is... As for the plot, I think too many people Star Wars is Luke, Darth Vader, too many people. I'm sorry. Star Wars is Luke, Darth Vader, and Leia. But it's not. Star Wars is a huge universe. And this is just one story of the whole huge universe, albeit a major story. At a high level, this story is really more about the Jedi and Sith. A story of how the Sith destroyed the Jedi and how they came back to bring peace to the universe. I look forward to what the next area of the universe and the movies explore. Keep up the positivity, Ben Fisher. Oh, I was wrong. I actually do have a couple more comments here. All right. So thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. And I got a comment here from Misconduct One. So here we go. Colin's script was trash, writes friend of the show, Misconduct One. Even though The Rise of Skywalker has small issues, his story makes me love JJ's movie that much more. Colin's script had Ben Solo dying an evil villain, and I would have been done with Star Wars for good had that happened. I'm not even joking. There's some fascinating stuff in what Colin Trevorrow wanted to do, and she was talking about I think she was talking about the guy that she works with. But anyways, Colin Trevorrow. There's some things in Colin Trevorrow's script that I liked. I thought were really interesting because it's Star Wars, right? I mean, some of the artwork was really, really cool looking. I mean, he had Rey dressed up like Luke from Return of the Jedi with a double-bladed blue lightsaber, for crying out loud. That'd be cool to see on screen. I think it would have made a fascinating Star Wars movie. I just think it would have been a horrible Episode 9. That's right? That's just how I just think it would have made a really, really bad episode 9. So, I don't like what he did with Ben Solo. There's a lot of ridiculousness in that movie, including adding a brand new villain in the final movie of the series. And Zach over at Knights of Vader does a really good job on their episode this week of talking about that, about how it would have been a massive, massive mistake to bring in a brand new villain at the end of this franchise. And it makes all the sense in the world to bring back Palpatine. And I absolutely agree. I have one more here, and I failed to get who wrote it. So my apologies. If I'm reading this, please write me and let me know who you are that wrote it, because I didn't write it down when I cut and pasted. You mentioned that future generations see the saga as one film, as George Lucas said. This is one movie meant to be seen from beginning to end. And that is exactly how I see it. Okay? George's outlines always had the idea of a young couple being pursued by a Darth Vader impersonator who led the new regime that came from the ashes of the Empire, and part of the plot included a young woman to try to convince an old and exiled Luke to train her as a Jedi, which he was reluctant about. Sound familiar, right? Yeah, it does. They did not use his outline for 7, but for 8, and then Abrams came to direct 9 and met again with George to oversee the plot. And about those who complain about the sequel trilogy and say that it's not the vision Lucas had in mind, they're full of zero. Mike Zero, he's a liar. They just want to see Luke bring a Star Destroyer down with the Force. They accept that Luke, the Jedi, marries an Sith assassin on Legends, but can't accept him going into exile, which was basically every Jedi who survived Order 66 did. Also, this has nothing to do with Star Wars, but is it snowing in your city? Yes, it is. Here, it is hot as Tatooine with the trees, and it makes my neighborhood look like Endor, almost 40 degrees Celsius. No, man, it's been slushy and snowy, and I love it because I'm an indoor kind of guy. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for hanging out with the show this week. I really do appreciate it. Please share the show, like and subscribe on YouTube, subscribe wherever you go, and listen to the podcast. Again, I am trying to grow it. It would be amazing one day down the road when I retire from radio if I could just write books and do Star Wars podcasts. But I love my job. My job is fantastic. And it affords me the opportunity to do the podcast now and to still write my books. It would just be great to one day just be doing that, but not until I retire. So please share the show, help it grow. As always, if you want to support the show, I don't have Patreon, but what I do ask is that if you read or you know somebody who reads science fiction, especially if they're Star Wars fans, please stop what you're doing right now and head over to Amazon.com and pick up a whatever version, ebook, paperback, or audiobook narrated by me and produced by me of my EMBARK science fiction series. If you want to know what other people are saying about the books, check out the Zeng This, Z-E-N-G, Zeng This podcast that I did with Zenger last week. Really had a great time being interviewed by him. He's a big fan of the audiobooks, and it just meant the world to me to be able to actually be interviewed by somebody that loved the books. It was fantastic. But if you want to support the show, pick up a copy of the ebook for a friend. You can do it right there on the homepage. The ebook is $2.99. Right now I have the paperbacks at $12.99 because EMBARK Book 1 is relatively longer than Treasure in Darkness, which is the middle chapter. And I am into the editorial edit of The Vanishing War, which is EMBARK Book 3 and should be out in the next couple of months. So support the show, pick up a copy for you or a friend. If you purchase the ebook for $2.99, you can get a huge discount on the audio book. And it really means a lot to me once I post the show, when I see that I've got an uptick in sales and you guys supporting the show. So again, go to Amazon.com and search for EMBARK, Jon Justice, and you can pick up a copy there for, again, you or a friend. And if you do and you read them and you like them, please go and leave a positive review. I need all the reviews that I can get my hands on. All right, I look forward to hearing from you in the week to come. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Also, leave a comment on YouTube. And I always forget to promote it. 2 more things, and I always forget to do this. I do have a website, mynerdworld.net. I always forget to talk about it. I don't know why. Yeah, there is a website for all this stuff, mynerdworld.net. All of the Star Wars podcasts are available there. The other podcasts I do are available there. All the information about my books, and there's a slew of fantastic concept art for the covers, including the newest cover, which I love, 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 love. Tom Edwards' design really took my idea of a major space battle happening above Mars and just nailed it to a T for the Vanishing War. So if you want to see how that whole concept came about, that artwork is available at mynerdworld.net. Also is the link where you can go and pick up the books there. So go and check it out. I always forget to talk about it. Lastly, I do have a mailing list. You will never get spammed. The mailing list is strictly about specials that I have coming up in terms of the book releases, stuff about the podcast. But if you want to join the mailing list, just email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and say, hey, put me on the mailing list. And you'll be the first to know about upcoming releases, special discounts on the books when they arrive, when they're available. Also, I've got some plans to actually put out some excerpts of the books that didn't make it into the books, that if you read them and you want to read them, I'll be sharing those with you. So just email me and say, hey, put me on your mailing list, and I will do that. All right, I guess that's it for this week. Can't wait to go watch The Rise of Skywalker again. Have yourself a fantastic week. Avoid the coronavirus if you can. It's scary stuff. I'm going to watch Contagion this weekend because it's eerily like what's going on with this coronavirus. It's unbelievable. I guess there were some people here in Minneapolis that are being quarantined at the airport. I don't know. Pretty freaky. All right. Have yourself a fantastic week. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching, and we will talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.